All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and we do have two classes joining us for the first time today, really excitingly, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, as you saw with that really cool intro, we've done programs from all over the world, over 90 countries, every continent, really exciting presentations. But today, we're going a little bit closer to home for a lot of our classes, and close to home for me personally here in Toronto. We are joined by the Friends of the Rouge. So last week, we joined them on a fall colors walk. Jim, Rob, and Tivia took us on a tour through beautiful Rouge Park, one of the sort of elite biodiversity areas in Toronto, in Ontario, and if not in all of Canada. And we explored fall colors, the change of the seasons, and some really cool trees. Today, we're doing it one step further, and we are going to go on a virtual tree planting with them. I personally did not know that we planted trees in November, so this is really exciting for me. I hope you guys are as excited to learn as I am, and we're going to turn it over to Jim and Tivia to take us away and teach us all about what they're doing out in Rouge Park. So thank you so much for joining us, Friends of the Rouge team, and take us away.
Well, hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining the Friends of the Rouge Watershed today for our virtual tree planting demonstration. We are super excited to be outside enjoying this warm, lovely weather and planting trees in the watershed today for our virtual tree planting demonstration. My name is Tivia and I am the Environmental Project Coordinator with the Friends of the Rouge Watershed, and I'm joined today by Jim Robb, the General Manager at Friends of the Rouge Watershed, and we are making sure to be safe and keep our 2-meter distance. And Jim will be talking to you later on about some of the important work that we do at the Friends of the Rouge Watershed. So today we will be going through a tree planting demonstration. We'll show you how to plant a beautiful native species that we have here. We'll also be showing you some amazing before and after photos of some of the work that the Friends of the Rouge Watershed has done throughout the years. And we'll also be popping in some little tidbits about some trees that you can find here in the Rouge and in your backyard. So before we get started, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement, just to show respect for the Indigenous peoples that lived on and took care of this land for thousands of years. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered upon the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and Allied Nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in this community and on this territory. So now I'll pass it off to Jim, who will introduce you to Friends of the Rouge Watershed.
Thank you, Tivia. Hi guys, thanks for joining the virtual tree planting day of Friends of the Rouge. And I hope maybe some of the schools, probably over 50 schools in the Eastern Toronto area have participated in our plantings. And over the last 29 years, I think we've planted 750,000 trees, almost, with about 65,000 school and community volunteers. So the trees you see behind us actually are part of a planting we did about 15 years ago. And some of the teachers that may be online today might have actually planted with us out here. So thank you for all your work through the years. I wanted to show you a few before and after pictures to just show you the amazing changes that can occur from the simple act of planting a tree. This is a site up in Markham in Bob Hunter Memorial Park, which is a part of Rouge Park, but it's dedicated to the great Canadian environmentalist Bob Hunter, who passed away in 2005. You could just see the remarkable change in just several years. This is the Beer Wetland. Many of you who've been with us for years know this used to be a gravel pit, and it's gone from being a gravel pit with almost no living things there to now this wonderful wetland with everything from frogs to otters and beaver and muskrat and deer and coyotes and ducks and all kinds of things, salamanders and newts. It's quite amazing how we dug holes and we brought in some soil and planted trees in an area that was just hugely scarred by past use. This is a planting on an old landfill. So this site had been totally destroyed and landfilled, and we went in with volunteers and school students. It's called the Beer Landfill. It's just east of the Toronto Zoo, which is right on the eastern edge of Toronto. And now it's coming back into a forest, and animals and plants are moving in, and it's going to be a beautiful park that you can see right across Lake Ontario from the top of the landfill because it's so tall. and where we are. So we're very fortunate. The work of thousands of people over the years has got us a 79 square kilometer park on the eastern edge of Toronto. And it stretches all the way from the Lake Ontario shoreline, all the way up to Stouffville and Uxbridge in the Oak Ridges Moraine. And it goes through Markham and Pickering and Scarborough. The Toronto Zoo is sort of in the lower part of the Rouge Park. And just imagine, right next to a big city, we have 16,000 football fields of land protected as a national park. And that's thanks to thousands and thousands of people's work over decades and decades, including people like Lois James, the mother of the Rouge, who passed away last year. Turn it back to Tivia for the planting.
Yes, all right. So today I'm going to be planting a beautiful eastern white pine that you see here. I actually have a close-up of what the needles of the white pine look like. So the eastern white pine is a coniferous tree, which has cone-bearing. It's a cone-bearing tree, sorry, and it has needles instead of leaves. And the needles are very long and skinny, as you can see. And the white pine is really easy to recognize because it has needles that grow in bunches of 5 as well. And these trees can live for up to 200 years as well. And Jim has a fun fact about the eastern white pine as well.
Well, in fact, in this area, maybe 200 years further north in Temagami, there are 300, 400-year-old trees. And some people call white pine one of the biggest carnivores on Earth because it actually has a relationship with fungi in the soil that kill insects, digest them, and pass over the nutrients from the insects to the roots of the pine tree.
All right. So for our tree planting, the first step to planting a tree is digging your hole. And when you're digging your hole, you want to make sure that your hole is just a little bit bigger than the size of the pot that your tree came in. So we have, when you're starting to dig your hole, you want to dig sort of a square shape. So you make 4 marks in the ground with your shovel. And when you're using your shovel, you want to make sure that the handle is forward and your blade is pointing straight down. And you just use your foot to push down really hard and make those 4 marks in the ground. And so we've already done that a little bit. So now I can just scoop up the dirt that's in my hole.
And if you look at the shovel's designed to act like a lever. So if you put the blade straight and then you pull the handle back, it really gives you superpower. It's like, you know, when you're lifting someone on a teeter-totter. If you do it that way, it's a lot less work on your back because you can use the shovel as a lever.
All right, we've just got some grass caught in there, so I'll just pull this up. There we go. All right, so now I'm gonna stick my shovel in the ground and grab my tree and just place it in the hole to make sure that we have a good fit for the tree. So it's a little bit too deep. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab some loose soil that we have broken up here. And I'm just gonna sprinkle it in the hole and push it down just to raise the height of our tree when we place it in.
And if I can just show them, you all know the story of Goldilocks, the porridge is too hot, it's too cold, and it's just right. It applies to tree planting. If you make it too deep, like if we were to plant it where the soil came up here, it would make the stem of the tree rot. So if we planted it only this deep, then the roots would stick out and the tree wouldn't like that neither. So the Goldilocks zone is when the surrounding soil is just level with the potting soil. And that's the right depth.
Yes, and a good way to measure how deep your hole should be is actually to use your shovel as a measuring stick. So if I place my shovel up against the pot here, I can see that it needs to be a little bit lower or shallower than the tip of my shovel blade here. So if I put my shovel in the hole, it's a little bit, the ground is just a little bit shallower than the tip of my shovel blade. So that looks good to me. So the next step is we have to take our pot off of our tree. And sometimes this can be difficult if the tree has been growing in the pot for a really long time. But an easy way to do this is just to give your tree a gentle little hug all the way around the sides of the pot, just so that we loosen up the soil in the pot and so that the tree will slide out really easily, just like so.
And being a tree hugger is actually a good thing.
Yeah. All right, so I'll place my tree in the hole here. And like Jim mentioned, we want to make sure that the soil on the inside is even with the soil outside of the tree. So you can just place your hand flat on the ground just to check if the soil is level, which it is here. And next we want to sort of tuck in the soil all the way around our tree and bring back all that soil that we took out of our hole. So I'm just going to grab some soil. And what I like to do is I'll sprinkle some in, and we kind of want to tuck the tree in, almost like how you would tuck your bed sheets in under your mattress if you've ever made your bed. So what I like to do is I'll take my hands, I'll lock my fingers together nice and tight, and I'll keep my hands nice and straight. And I'll grab that soil, I'll break it up, and I'll tuck it all the way around the tree, keeping my hands vertical and pushing straight down. So we're tucking the soil, breaking it up, and tucking it all the way around. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get rid of any air pockets that might be in our hole. And as we're doing this, you also want to make sure that your tree is nice and straight, just so that it continues to grow that way. So I'll fill in any holes. All the way around. And then I'll fill in any gaps that we have, just to make sure everything is nice and level.
One of the things I like to do is planting a tree is actually somewhat of a spiritual thing. This tree could live to be 200, 300 years old, and all during that time it's giving us oxygen, it's providing beauty, it's holding the soil together to stop flooding and erosion, it's providing biodiversity, homes for animals. And so this tree in 100 years might be 10 stories high, and actually an eagle might be nesting in it. But it's giving your great-grandchildren oxygen, and it's stabilizing the climate. So planting a tree is something worth saying a little prayer or just meditating for a few moments while you're doing it.
All right. So next what I'm going to do is I'm gently, with my foot, I'm going to press down and make the shape of a triangle just around the stem of the tree, just like so. So I'm going to press down once, twice, and 3 times. And what this is going to do is just going to make sure that our tree is not going anywhere and it's nice and settled in its new home.
And if you make a triangle with 3 equal sides, if any of you guys are taking your math, that's an equilateral triangle because
Exactly.
the equal sides.
All right, and so to protect the tree, I'm going to place before I do that, I'm going to grab our weed blanket here. And what this weed blanket is going to do is it's going to block the sunlight for any weeds that might try to poke through and compete with our eastern white pine. So I'm just going to place that around the base of the tree here, just like so. And then I'm going to grab 2 buckets of mulch and just place them around the base of the tree in the shape of a donut. And mulch is really important because it will provide a little bit of a blanket from the cold for my tree. And it will also help to keep the soil underneath nice and cool and moist. It'll also block out the sunlight, like I mentioned, for any weeds that might try and pop through. And it also protects the roots of the tree. So when I'm placing my mulch, I don't want to place it too close to the stem of the tree because that will cause the stem to get wet and rot, which we don't want. So I'm just going to place my mulch a little bit farther back away from the tree. And I'll grab my second bucket. And once again, just place that mulch in the shape of a donut all the way around the tree. All right. Just make sure it's not too close to the stem. And there we go.
So now you have a beautifully planted eastern white pine tree. Now, why do we plant trees? Well, there's many reasons. One is because they're beautiful. But We need oxygen, and almost all the living things on Earth need oxygen to survive, from elephants to whales to people to fish. We all need oxygen. Trees provide oxygen. Everything green around you is helping you by providing oxygen. But trees drink in carbon dioxide. They use it actually to make sugars that are the wood of the tree. And we have too much carbon dioxide in our atmosphere right now. And it acts like a big, huge blanket, and it prevents the heat from escaping from the earth. So the earth's getting warmer. And when the earth gets warmer, it might sound nice, but it means our climate gets more extreme and we get more extreme weather events and more flooding. Trees are amazing for stopping flooding. The Insurance Bureau of Canada has recommended that restoring forests and wetlands is one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce flooding. In Canada, I think we're up to about $3 billion a year of damage from flooding, $2 to $3 billion, and it's increasing. And trees, they hold the soil together so it doesn't run away into the river and pollute the river, but they direct the water underground into these big things called aquifers or groundwater lakes. And that beautiful stored water is fresh and clean, and people can drink it. They can use wells, or it goes into our streams slowly for the fish to survive, and eventually it goes to our lakes so that we have clean drinking water from our lake. So trees absorb oxygen, they produce oxygen, they absorb carbon dioxide, they reduce flooding and erosion, they provide biodiversity, and they benefit our lives.
Awesome. And we actually have a couple trees that we planted earlier just beside Jim there. So we've got a red maple right over here that Jade, our lovely camera lady, has planted earlier today. And this is what the leaf of a red maple looks like. And the leaves of red maples are roughly toothed all the way around the sides, and they have 3 to 5 shallow lobes. And the sinuses in between have a sharp V shape. And in the fall, as you can see, the red maple leaves turn a very pretty bright red or orange color. And there's also an aspen tree that we have right behind here that was planted.
Oh, you're back, guys.
Sandy soils that are a little bit more dry, and some trees prefer more lowland wet areas. And in the Rouge right here, we are in a little bit of the Goldilocks area where it's just right in the middle, and trees do fairly well in that little middle area. So this is an aspen tree that we have here.
Yeah, and just behind us, if you see that beautiful tree turning golden yellow, that's a tamarack. And although it's a coniferous tree, and most coniferous trees we call evergreen and they stay green all year round, this coniferous tree actually drops its needles in the fall and goes a beautiful yellow. And the trees over here on the left are cedars that were planted by volunteers years ago. And I especially love cedars because they smell really nice. But we named our dog, who's now gone, Cedar, because her color was this beautiful light brown and sort of caramel color. And the cedar wood's like that. If you've ever seen a cedar canoe, they have this lovely brown color or tan color. So those are cedar, an aspen, and a tamarack. Back to you, I think, Jesse.
Well, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for walking us through such a cool tree planting. So neat to get that opportunity to see that live. And again, unlike pretty much anything else we do. So I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, let's dive in with questions, everyone. If you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook and you want to type a question in the chat bar, just let me know where you're joining from and I'll try and take a few from there. We will go to our live classes. We got 6 live groups from across Ontario and Alberta with us today. So I'm going to start with Mr. Boccia's class. He's joining in Toronto. And Mr. Allard's class, I'll come to you guys in a second. So Mr. Boccia, if you have any questions or comments or anything from your class, go for it.
Hi, my class is wondering what species of tree do you plant the most? And also, how long does a red maple take to get to maturity?
Nice.
Okay, thank you very much. So Eastern white pine is one of them because it's really hardy and it's our provincial tree. And one of the reasons it's hardy, in areas where you have a lot of deer, actually too many deer like the Rouge, the hardwood trees are sweet tasting, like the maples, you know, they make maple syrup, so they're sweet tasting, and the rabbits and deer tend to eat them all up. Whereas the pine trees, they don't taste very good. In fact, cough medicine, they use pine bark as one of the ingredients in cough medicine, and that's one of the reasons it tastes so bad. So we plant a lot of white pine. We also plant a lot of white cedar because it's native and it grows well in wet soils. The deer actually do like white cedar, and they know something that native people knew, and that's if you take white cedar, they have a beautiful green sort of flattened sort of leaf. If you put it in a little bit of hot water, it actually produces vitamin C, which prevents scurvy. And it also has a bit of medicinal value. If you have a cold or a sore throat, if you take a little bit, it'll make your throat feel better. So we plant a lot. We do plant maples and birch and aspen also, but sometimes we actually have to build fences around them, like this fence in the background, because the deer and the rabbits and meadow voles, there's so many, they just gobble up those trees in the wintertime when there's no green grass for them to eat. In terms of the red maple, red maples can also grow maybe to 150, 200 years old and a meter in diameter. But the white pines can actually go 200 to 400 years old and grow 2 meters in diameter and 16 stories high.
Wow, very cool. Thanks, Jim. I'd encourage all our classes, when you're done this, try and find a picture online. I've seen this in provincial parks in Ontario, where you'll see an area where they put up a fence as sort of a deer protection zone, and the amount of growth that's in that area versus the rest of the forest is absolutely unbelievable. So hopefully you get a chance to check that out. Mr. A's class in Toronto, you just typed a question in the chat bar, but if you'd like to come in live, half the fun of coming in here is sharing it live. So if you want to demute your microphone, you're welcome to. And if not, I will happily share that question. It's one I knew we were going to get. So, oh, okay. If the internet's a little iffy. Okay, perfect. So Mr. A's class joining us in Toronto, do you need to water them after, or do you just let the weather do its work?
Well, that's an excellent question. Whenever you plant a tree, you should actually water it, because the watering helps the soil to settle so there's no air gaps. If you have a big air pocket around your tree, sometimes a little meadow vole, which is like a little hamster-like, mouse-like critter, they'll say, oh, gee, that's great. I'll make my den there. And if they make their den there where they don't have to dig because there's a hole, then they will eat the roots off your tree. Now, this time of year in November, the trees have gone to sleep, and we're tucking the soil in very carefully. So we don't really have to water them at this time of year because they've lost their leaves. They're no longer using a lot of water, and it's coming into the cool, damp season. But in the springtime, definitely, if it isn't raining or if the soil isn't wet, we water every time we plant. Good question.
Great question, guys. Awesome. All right, let's go to R.H. King, Miss Canerva's class, grade 9. If you have a question for us, just demute your mic. Come on in. Go for it.
Yeah, the kids were wondering what's the best time to plant trees so that they survive.
Yeah.
Also an excellent question. The best time to plant trees is really April and May. At that time of year, tree roots are all primed and ready to grow. So if the roots have been damaged by coming out of the pot or growing in the pot, they're really ready to recover and to spread out and to really do well. The fall, though, is really good also. So April and May are the best time to plant a tree. The next best time would be late September, October, and until the soil freezes in November. Some trees like the aspen and the maple and that, they do fairly well in the fall, because think about it, the roots grow a bit in the fall, and then as soon as the spring starts, they're nice and planted. There's no disruption, no shock from transplanting, and they're all ready to go before the next summer. So they have a lot of time to recover. There are certain trees you shouldn't plant in the fall. Some types of oaks, things like serviceberry, and there are a few trees that you shouldn't actually plant in the fall. But most trees best to plant early April and May and October and early November.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim. All right, Ms. Lagerquist's class, I can bring you in. You typed a question in the chat bar, but your text should be all working maybe. So I'll bring you in if you have a mic ability to ask it, and if not, I'll share it. I know we have some weird tech things today, but welcome in, guys. I know it's your first time joining us. So Ms. Lagerquist's class, if you guys want to share another question in a minute, I'll pass. You're going to try. Let's see. Fingers crossed. Better to ask in person. That's some weird tech. There we go. Welcome in, guys. I know it's your first time joining us. So Ms. Lagerquist's class, if you guys want to share another question in a minute, I'll pass. You're going to try. Let's see.
I'm going to try. Can you see me?
I'm going to ask in person.
All right, there's my class. Can you?
Oh, so we got epic delay with you guys. I'm sorry for that. It's about like 20 seconds behind where we are, the rest of us. So I'll share it online. If you have another question, you can type in the chat bar. I'm sorry there's some tech issues, guys. So they want to know about a niche question. They're in Markham and they want to know where they can plant trees in Markham. So I know you guys are near Markham in the east end of Toronto for anyone who's not in the GTA. Where can kids go to plant trees in the area?
That's a good question. A few years ago, actually 10 years ago, Friends of the Rouge was planting 75,000 trees per year. And we were doing it in Bob Hunter Park, which is part of Rouge Park. Rouge Park has gone from becoming an Ontario park to a national park. And in that transition, unfortunately, tree planting has really dropped in the number of sites available. We actually haven't been able to plant in the park for about 7 years. So that's a good question. It's getting tougher. There's a real need in Markham. Markham only has about 5% forest cover overall. And the scientific studies say that you need at least 30% forest cover to have healthy water quality, healthy air quality, and a healthy community to live in. So there's a lot of work to do in Markham, and maybe the students can encourage their municipal leaders and everybody who's in charge of Rouge Park now to actually let non-government organizations like Friends of the Rouge come back in and do plantings in the park.
Fantastic. I'm glad we got that message in, guys. One of the things that was shocking to me when I visited Friends of the Rouge in person was the idea that Ontario is one of actually the most degraded ecosystems.
Oh, Jimmy had no more data.
Oh, you're good, guys. We'll come back in a second. Hopefully they get their connection working again. But yes, the idea that Ontario, which I've grown up in my entire life, an area that I think of, as having a lot of trees and a lot of forest cover, certainly as you see from the CN Tower, and actually compared to most of the world, Ontario is one of the most, used landscapes in the world, whether that's for farmland or for city or for else. So there's lots of ways that we can get involved, help plant trees, help support organizations that do plant trees. So hopefully you get that chance. I'm going to check in with Friends of the Rouge. Oh, they just left us. Hopefully they're back in a second. One of the difficulties of broadcasting from a park as opposed to an office. So Miss Cedars' class and Miss Ramsey's class. I'm going to come to you guys next as long as we can get the Friends of the Rouge back. Let's give them a quick minute. While we're waiting for them, and I said this at the top of the broadcast, if you'd like, the Fall Colors Walk, which happened last week, was really, really exceptional. First time we've ever done anything like that as well. So you can check out that broadcast on our YouTube channel as part of our whole month dedicated to conservation here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So we've got conservation from all around the world, and it's really nice to bring it back home and highlight conservation efforts and some of the beauty of nature and habitats here in Ontario and in Canada generally. So with that, let me email our Friends of the Rouge folks and see if we can get them back in. Back in. And worst case, what we'll do is they're a really friendly bunch. So we'll be able to take your questions and share it with them and hopefully get some answers for you guys after the fact, worst case scenario. But I'm going to give them a couple minutes and we'll see how it goes. Awesome. All right. Other quick note for you guys, Friends of the Rouge. So they started our partnership. We started our partnership with them back in April. And so we did an amphibian and turtle release, which was really cool. We did a whole series of programs back then as well, another forest walk. So hopefully you get a chance to check all those out. Looks like they're back in. Hey, Friends of the Rouge team.
How do you turn up the volume?
Oh, they're just figuring out their tech. You're all good.
Yeah, I didn't have enough data. Sorry, Jesse.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay, guys. And if it doesn't work to rotate the camera, just stay like that. That's totally fine. Awesome. Glad to have you guys back here. So, Buck, with that, keep it straight. Don't worry about the camera. We're going to go to Miss Ramsey's class, joining us all the way in Calgary, our one non-Ontario class today. So, Miss Ramsey's class, if you want to demute your mic, come on in and ask a question. Go for it. And hopefully all the connection holds for us all. Hey, guys.
Hello. All right.
Hey.
Here. There you go.
Do you know how much species of trees
I'll
are there?
say it again.
Do you know how much types of trees are there? And can you plant trees in Calgary?
Yeah, how many types?
Yeah, so in the Rouge area, because it's fairly south, it's along the shores of Lake Ontario, there's probably about 70 different species of trees. In Calgary, in the Rocky Mountains, there might only be 30 or 40 because there's a little bit cooler climate. But yeah, you can plant trees. In fact, Calgary had a big flood a few years ago. And one of the things that people know is that if you plant trees and create wetlands upstream of urban areas, it really helps reduce the flooding risk, and it provides homes for wildlife, and it looks beautiful. So yeah, you should be able to plant trees in Calgary, and there should be non-government organizations and government organizations that can maybe help you to find a place and help you plant.
Fantastic. I certainly know from my time visiting Banff National Park in Calgary that there's the Biosphere Institute in Canmore, some other amazing organizations. So you can check out some of the work that they're doing online and definitely find some places where you can help plant trees. It's a really interesting point you mentioned too, Jim, about ecosystem services. This is something that was talked about in Ontario a couple of years ago. The idea of having a green belt or an area that protects against those sort of impacts like flooding, natural disasters. You see this on coasts as well. Nature helps protect our cities, our towns, and people. So it's a really other important element of what nature can do for us as human beings. So thank you so much for highlighting that. All right, Miss Teeter's class joining us in Guelph. Come on in and go for it.
Hi there. One of my students is wondering, what is the most stressful part of planting trees? Do you have any concerns that you need to consider before going ahead and planting?
Yeah, you really need to plan to mulch and water them for the first year or two. This year we had a very brutal dry spell between about middle of June and the middle of July, and that's when trees are still growing. And normally the dry spells come in late July and August. This year it got so hot and so dry early, it really hurt a lot of the young planted trees. So it's good, you need to arrange follow-up watering if you can. And when you put mulch and wheat blankets on, that really helps to hold the water in the soil and keep the soil cool through a drought. So that helps the little trees. But you really do have to think through, and it helps if you can prepare the site too, like to rototill the soil if it's not really new soil or if it has a lot of grass, and to add mulch to the soil, because wood chips and leaves and all those things help to keep the soil healthy so the trees can live through a drought.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. All right. Mr. A's class, phone call in the midst of a chat and a video call. It's half the fun, I suppose. Mr. A's class, they asked online, they had a bit of trouble with their connectivity today, but they asked, can you plant throughout the year even when there's snow or not?
No, so once you get in Toronto area, the frost goes in the ground, usually the first week or two of December. And of course you can't dig after that. And it's good to really plant before the frost even starts to go in the ground. Because sometimes what happens if you plant late into November, the frost actually, the freeze and thaw actually tries to push the potting soil of the tree out of the hole. That's another reason why we put the wheat blanket and mulch, so that the frost goes in very slowly and it doesn't keep freezing and thawing. So best times to plant are when the frost comes out of the ground in April until about the middle of May, and in October and early November.
Fantastic. All right, I'll take the one other question from the class that's having a bit of tech difficulties, and then we'll go back to Mr. Boccia for 4 straight live ones. So Ms. Lagerquist's class, they wanted to know, is there a best kind of tree to plant, like a super tree, the coolest tree of all? We're going to save the world with one kind of tree. What is it, Jim?
Well, I love them all, and each tree brings in its own companion group of biodiversity. Like oak trees bring in, butterflies and moths and squirrels, flying squirrels and regular squirrels. Pines and spruce trees bring in red squirrels and different types of birds that like to be sheltered. So I love them all, but I must say I do love eastern white pine, because it lives so long, it looks so graceful, and it also doesn't taste good, so the deer and the rabbits don't eat it all up when we plant it.
What a great answer. Now, you talked about flying squirrels today. You talked about it last week as well. Otters, like the Rouge Park, is this really, really biodiverse area. And I just want to stress for classes at home, whether you're in Toronto proper or in the general Toronto area, check out online the Toronto Biodiversity Series. So this is made in conjunction with the Royal Ontario Museum, the government here in Toronto and beyond. And it's a really incredible series of booklets on insects, spiders, plants, mammals, birds, etc. of this region. So you can see all the incredible creatures that live near us. I really encourage you to get that, and it is free on all their websites, and it's often at public libraries too. So check out the Toronto Biodiversity Series. All right, Mr. Boccia in Toronto, speak of the devil, come on back in if you got another question for us. Go for it.
Hi, we just wondered about how many species are in Rouge Park.
Yeah.
I think there's probably about 70 species of trees, about maybe more than 70 of shrubs, and probably over 1,000 other plants that you would, you'd recognize as plants. Because the Rouge is in this incredible zone where the Great Lakes forests blend with the Carolinian forests that come up from the southern United States, from North and South Carolina, and they include trees like tulip trees, sycamore trees, hickory trees, sassafras trees. The farthest north they make it in Canada is the Rouge. And then you've got the Great Lakes forests that are also here. So that's what makes the Rouge one of the most biologically rich areas in all of Canada. It really is a biodiversity hotspot, and it's amazing. It's right next to Canada's biggest city. So it'll take a lot of work to protect it and restore it. But if we can put back, get up to 60% forest and wetland cover in the Rouge, this will be probably the most biologically diverse area in all of Canada, and future generations will really be able to appreciate a national park right next to Canada's biggest city.
It's quite an incredible accomplishment. So kudos to you guys for all the work that you've done to help make that a reality. Your pictures at the beginning were beautiful, highlighting how people can really make a big difference in promoting ecosystem health and bringing species back. Again, living in Toronto, having a chance to see the parks, including Rouge Park, it's really unbelievable how many amazing creatures are there. And I just want to make a quick plug. I know a lot of our teachers live might know of this, some of them might not. So in September, we ran the pilot for a project called Backyard Bio. It's coming back in May, bigger and badder than ever. So if you guys are excited, we'd love to have you join us. It's all about getting out in nature, exploring and finding and sharing the species near you. So again, whether you're in Toronto proper, if you're in the GTA or across Canada or the world, we'd love to have you take part in that project. So do check that out. Also, Jim, this has been fascinating. This session, we've had cameras die, we've had trains in the background, cars in the background, phone calls. See, this is what happens when you're trying to get out in nature, but it's a really great time. So I'm so glad it's gone so well so far. Awesome. Well, let's go to Miss Canerva's class. If you guys have a question for us at RH King, come on back in. Go for it. Oh, just demute your mic when you get a chance. There we go.
Rookie mistake. What's the age of the oldest tree found at the Rouge?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure exactly about that, but I have seen some oaks that are probably 200 years old. I'm hopeful that in 150 years from now, there'll be lots of 200 and 300-year-old trees in the Rouge, and maybe even a few of them we will have helped to get going. And some of the students come back to our sites. It's so nice, and they see the trees, just like these ones. They're only, 15 to 20 years old, and they're cedar, which are slow growing. But these cedars, they could live for 200 or 300 years too.
That's fantastic. My favorite thing, like truly, when I go to parks, I'm one of those people that actually hug trees. So try and find a tree that you can't actually put your arms around, and that's a sign that you've got a really old and wonderful tree. So thanks, Jim, for the really cool story. All right, 2 more questions, guys. Let's go to Miss Ramsey's class first and Miss Cedars to wrap up. So Miss Ramsey group, come on up, demute your mic. Go for it.
Go. I don't know.
What is the rarest tree you plant in the park?
Ooh, the rarest.
That's a good question. So there were no tulip trees. Tulips trees are trees that some people in the United States, they call them yellow poplar. They grow like a poplar, but they have a beautiful yellow flower. I think it's yellow, whitish flower with yellow stamens. And this is the tulip tree leaf. And they grow really fast, but the deer really like to eat them. So if we don't protect them, the deer kind of eat them all. But we've planted some, and now there weren't tulip trees in the Rouge Park 10 years ago, but they were nearby in Western Toronto. And so we planted some, and they're growing. There's a few other trees too that we've done that, like swamp white oak. And we had 2 sycamores in the Rouge years ago. Now we've planted several thousand. So now there's several thousand. And this is what the sycamore leaf looks like. They're almost as big as a dinner plate sometimes. So they have really big leaves. So those are some of the rare ones, the tulip tree, the sycamore. And over time, the climate is changing. And so the Rouge will probably have more Carolinian species like sassafras and things like redbud or Cercis canadensis. These are all trees that would belong in the Rouge as the climate changes.
Yeah. I've never seen a leaf like that. That's unbelievable. So man, this is such cool stuff. Again, for all our classes, when the world opens up again, you can check out some of the programs live with Friends of the Rouge Watershed, take part in real tree plantings, go on nature hikes. So hopefully you all get that opportunity if you're close. This is super, super cool, guys. Miss Teeter, I lied. I'm going to come to you in 1 second. We got a really cool question online from Miss Lagerquist's class, and we're actually really good for time. So Miss Lagerquist's class, they wanted to know, will trees die if there's too much sunlight? Maybe thinking of some of the plants in your house, you've got to put some in shade and some in sunlight. Do we have to worry about that when we're planting trees, Jim?
We do. So there's some trees in the Rouge like sugar maple and beech and hemlock, which they actually prefer to grow up with other trees around them in semi-shade. And so those trees, we sometimes have to be patient. We don't necessarily plant them right at the beginning. So we'll plant some other trees that really like full sunlight, and then we'll go back when there's a little bit of shade, and we'll maybe fence in the area because sugar maple and beech are really sensitive to deer browsing, and then we can start them. But sometimes seeding just does it naturally. So once you get the ball rolling, it's called succession, where it changes from the pioneer species, the birch and the pine and the aspen. Once that ball gets rolling, Mother Nature's really good at seed coming in and blowing across the snow or in the wind. And then we get these other longer lived trees that like the shade, like the sugar maple and the beech and the hemlock.
What a beautiful answer as before. Before we go into this last question, Jim, I just want to say for all our teachers and all our students today, if you can find something in life that you love as much as urban biodiversity and trees and wildlife as Jim does, you're set for life. Jim, this has been really fantastic. The comments are so nice about all that you've shared with us today. So Miss Teeter, wrap us up with one more question. Come on in and we'll go from there.
Hi, Jim. Can you just remind us how many trees the Rouge has planted so far, and how many trees would the Rouge plant annually?
Well, so over the last 29 years, Friends of the Rouge Watershed has planted about 736,000 trees, and we've involved about 65,000 students and community volunteers. We were planting back in the between about, I think, 2008 and 2013, we were planting 75,000 trees a year. But because we haven't been allowed into Rouge Park to plant, we don't have sites in the park, we're down to about 10,000 trees per year. Now I'm getting older, so 10,000 is a little more manageable, but I'm trying to get young people like Tivia and Jade, who's filming today, and Jared, and all the young crew, and pass on the torch so that they can carry the torch high. And if we restore in the Rouge, things can get better, and it can be a good news story for young people to actually see an area that was damaged from heavy deforestation in the past actually come back to life and give us clean air and clean water and biodiversity. And we need those good news stories around the world. The United Nations has said that the next 10 years are key years. They've labeled it the decade of ecological restoration. If we can put back 1 billion hectares and 1 trillion trees worldwide, we can stabilize our climate, we can stop the extinction of species, and we can create a healthier future for our children. So that's, we're one little group that's a part of that global effort.
Well, Jim, I think you've inspired all our teachers and all our classrooms. You've certainly inspired me. In the spring, I will be there to plant. Just give me some seeds and a shovel and we'll be good to go. Thank you so much for a really beautiful presentation today. All our 6 classes from all across Ontario, Alberta, and beyond. I really appreciate you all being here, especially some new groups today. So what we do at the end of every broadcast for our new groups is I want everyone to join me in saying a big thank you to Jim. So Mr. A, Miss Nerva, Miss Teeter, Miss Ramsey, Miss Lagerquist, come on in and say a big thank you and goodbye. And I'll bring up the Friends of the Rouge website you guys can check out as well. Friendsoftherouge.ca. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it.